Hi, guys. Okay, unexpected. I know. It was a surprise to me, too. But tomorrow night, Thursday night, the 8th, is a Christmas party that I am expected to show up on. So I'm going to have to be there for that. So I decided to go ahead and hop on here and try to do that. Got to make sure that my Trinity wolf is standing up right. Miss Trinity gave me that wolf, her being part of the Red Wolves, and I just want to make sure it's pointing up right. Hello, Lori. How you doing tonight? Oh, Tiny Titan. Sorry for the pop in unexpected, but I thought I was going to do a live tomorrow night, and unbeknownst to me, I forgot the fact that tomorrow night is my wife's work's Christmas party. So I thought I'd just pop on and talk a few minutes and go from that. So how are things going in Oregon, Lori? And sometimes they are when they're not expected. Hello, Duckman. How you doing? Mopar, good evening. I hear you, Tiny. Hello there, independent thinker. How you doing tonight? Hello, William in Long Island, New York. Kenneth and Ford Tractor Fanatic. Hello to Kansas. Yeah, the I had a very interesting day. I had a dead tree limb fall off of a big old oak tree and hit the roof. And like a Laurel and Hardy skit, it rolled. Well, as it rolled, the broke off nubs of what had been limbs coming off it went to harpooning into the roof. And so I've got to replace six hunks of plywood, six pieces of plywood. It's over 22 feet of damage that I got to replace. That was what I was doing today, was getting the plywood, getting up there, cleaning up, etc. So it's been a long day. I'm gonna talk to y'all, and then it's gonna be shower and bedtime for Blackie. Hello, Brian in the Sierra Nevadas. Independent getting a 32 regular ready for use. Hello, Todd, Mr. Todd Gibson. Good to see you, sir. Yeah, no, 32 squirrel rifle. I think I've had three of those, at least three. I had a one of the CVAs squirrel guns. I had a Pertasoli made a Blue Ridge rifle in 32 that I had that I really liked. That was a full size long rifle. And then I had a custom built 32 for a while that I played with and really, really enjoyed. And then every time somebody talked me out of it, because we'd go squirrel hunting and suddenly they wanted a squirrel rifle, and they talked me out of it. Ken, no, it wasn't a hurricane, just a dead tree. But a hurricane like 2 years ago damaged that tree, and I think it cracked it. And to go out there and look at it, you couldn't tell. It's just I noticed a couple of shed limbs off of it, but it was about that big a diameter and about 18, 25 feet long. And when it fell, it hit and just kind of rolled down the roof as those limbs went to tearing up the roof. So, Murphy's Law, you just got to get out there and take care of it. D. Hunter, hello there. Yes, we have some quail. Much more when I was younger, but now that the coyotes are here, you don't have much quail because they're a ground nester. Woodcock, I haven't seen any in a long time. I remember when I was a kid seeing some woodcock, but just not that much. Again, anything that's a ground nesting one, we've got so many coyotes down here now that it's really tough on them. Now, there are still places that raise quail and turn them loose for hunts, and there's a place about not quite an hour from me that they hold quail shoots every, you know, other weekend. I think they raise quail for that and just turn them loose into the wild out there. and have a hunt. And then any that escape, they just welcome to the wild. You're free. And yeah, it's helping to repopulate a lot of areas. It really is. Right. The Traditions Crockett rifle is wrong. It's for a round ball pitch, and when you go to put one of the maxi balls in it, it's just wrong pitch. It won't. You won't get your groups to dial down. Edgar, yeah, this is going to be independent of Thursday because Thursday I've got to go to a Christmas party I didn't know I was going to until tonight when I picked up the love of my life and she informed me that tomorrow night we're going straight from her work to the Christmas party. We are. Okay. So, I'm just the husband. You understand. Cole's Law. Hmm. I have heard variations of different laws making fun of Murphy's Law. I'm not familiar with Cole's Law, but okay. Brian, coyote hunting down here, people that enjoy coyote hunting, this is a mecca. But now you got to understand, we're in dense woods. And so you have a large industry down here of the chicken industry. So you have big chicken houses. And in many places, when they've got an animal dead or whatever, they just take it out. They got a ditch or some pit, they throw it in. Well, they ate good. And so you've got a lot of things down here for coyotes to eat. And since coyotes are, coyotes are just omnivores, they'll find it. If it's edible, they'll get on it. And so there's a lot of them down here. But, the average person doesn't even think about them as a hunting thing down here. That's further out west. And most of our coyotes are really good at staying down during the day and only coming out right at sundown or right after dark. And they got plenty of food, plenty of opportunity. So you hear them everywhere. You'll hear just wads of them. And of course, we also have pine wolf, which is the hybrid that's a mix of coyote and the indigenous Alabama red wolf, as well as dogs. And so a coyote is 30, 40, 50, 30, 40 pounds, something like that, and about X high. And then you got a 75 or 80 pound or 120-pound pine wolf, which once you see one, you'll know exactly what it is. It's one of the hybrids that runs in a pack. It's wild and it's more wolf than it is anything else, but it's got a lot of cross dog genes and etc. in it. The skulls are actually shaped different. It's a hybrid. And we've got them down here too. They hurt our deer population bad, even though we've got a huge deer population. Shannon, good evening. Independent thing. Yeah. Now them maxi balls are good, just not in that rifling pitch. But somebody's bound to want that. You shouldn't have any trouble getting rid of that, putting it out on eBay or something like that. Hello to Belgium. How you doing? Glad you caught it. A settler's wrench. Are you talking about for unbreeching, taking the breech plug out of a muzzleloader? Is that what you're calling a settler's wrench? I have removed the breech plug on a couple of muzzleloaders before where somebody's got something so jammed in there you had to do it to drive it out. I got a gun many, many years ago that the owner said that it had stripped out when he went to pull. The jag was stuck down in it. And so I got a good light and looked down in there and I could see it. And I tried in vain to thread it on. I even tried putting some super glue onto the threads and trying to just stick it on if it was stripped out, see if we could get enough grip to put it out. Forget it. So I had to unbreech it. And then when I took a steel rod and I tapped it out, what came out was his jag was this homemade thing. And I could see reason it stuck in there. It got kind of cockeyed in there and it stuck. So I don't usually carry those wrenches, but I have had to use that type of wrench before. Yeah, nomad. A lot of you up there in Kentucky. Well, in that kind of territory, you got the mountains and you got the valleys, and so you're going to kind of focus in a lot of times, especially the populated areas, be the place to be for a coyote, because you got trash, you got stuff on the side of the road, you got roadkill, you got everything, stuff getting washed into the ditches. Plus, you got domestic pets, house cats, small dogs, everything else, and so yeah, I mean that's a very fertile hunting ground for them. Many years ago, I was working for as one of my jobs was, and a lot of times I worked multiple jobs at one time, but I worked at PetSmart. And this one Sunday morning that I was working, and this lady called. You just by hearing her voice, you could just imagine Aunt B from Mayberry, just perfect fit. And she said that they had been a dog had take up residence underneath their back porch, and it had puppies, and that the mama and all the puppies had now left over the course of like 2 months, except for one. And so she wanted to know if she could bring Susie in and get her a distemper shot, a uh, rabies shot, get her a collar, and get her a harness. I said, sure, we'll be glad to help you. And she said, okay. Hung up the phone. Hour and a half later, I'm back on one of the aisles doing something. And I hear this, come on, Susie. Come on, Susie. Like that. And I turn around and look up, and here's a coyote coming up the aisle with this little old lady walking behind it, clapping her, going, keep going, keep going. And it's like a half-grown coyote. And I looked at that and said, ma'am, that's not a dog. That's a coyote. She said, that's Susie. Yes, ma'am. And Susie come up, let you pet her, and etc. And she said, it just, okay, follow me. And so we walked around there, and Susie let me put a collar on her and put a big dog harness on her and get a leash on her. And then we walked up to the vet, which is part of the building, and I knocked on the door, and we had a lady vet. And I said, got about a 35-pound canine, needs her distemper and her rabies shot, and she's 5.5 months old. And she's, oh yeah, we can handle that. And so she get her up here on the table. So I pick her up and set her up there. And of course the doc's doing back this. And she turned around and said, holy crap, that's a coyote. I said, yes, ma'am, and her name is Susie. And she would like her shot now. And so she gave her shots, and the lady paid thing, and she went walking out with the little leash. I mean, the old white hairdo and the big old moo dress. I mean, it Aunt B off Mayberry. And they went and climbed in like a 1962 Chevy pickup that was held together with spit and prayer, and rattled on out of the thing, heading back to the farm. So, somewhere in South Alabama, there's a Susie. Oh yeah, foxes will eat house cats. Hello, Rob. Um, Foxes perform the job of cats, basically. They normally go for small game, fast, high-speed game. And so a fox really does the job of what you think that a cat would go after. Having said that, they got no problems going after kittens or small cats. Now, a big tomcat would be a fight. They're not so quick to go for that. But, I've got a red-tailed hawk down here that we've got a smaller size cat. He's full grown, but he's one of the smaller size. And I had him out in the yard on a lead. We walked him. And his mama, which is a bigger cat, she just doesn't need a leash. She won't go nowhere. You can turn her loose. But he's kind of dumb. And so if we turned him loose, he'll be just gone, and walk out in front of a car. He's just dumb as a post. And love him to death, but him too big a dingleberry. And so I had him on a retractable lead, and I went up and I got a cord, I just tied it to a tree. And I was outside doing something, and I happened to look up just as this hawk flared out. He was going to go for Raja, and the hawk saw me and faded off, But so I can't keep him out there alone, because there's a chance that hawk will come back and get him. He likes to have a tree up the street, and there's a lot of chipmunks on this street because a lot of people feed squirrels and stuff, and there's just tons of ground squirrels and chipmunks. And so that hawk is eating good in the neighborhood. So, and it's against the law to harm a bird of prey. So I can't do anything to him other than yell at him. But, you know, Dave Bush, hello, Silver Wolf. Yep. I got a new Silver Wolf coming out here in, it's either going to come out tomorrow or it's going to come out Friday. I'm not sure right now. I'm talking about the difference between a fuzzy stick and a feather stick. In a lot of the old Boy Scout manuals and a lot of the old woodsman books and things, they make a reference to a fuzzy stick as opposed to a feather stick. And I did a video talking about that, and I'll just share right quick what I was talking about. If the stick is wet, you make a feather stick to cut down into the dry and stand it up if the grain of the stick will allow it. Some woods and just had grew in life, you can't hardly make a feather out of it because it wants to just snap off. The grain is in and out, even though it's a round, short limb. You just don't want to work. When that happens, the best thing to do is just to make a fuzzy stick where you just push, lift up a little bit, twist, and go all the way around the stick. It's like a bottle brush when you get done, as opposed to everything on one side like feathers. And they both do kind of the same job, but usually it was if the wood was wet, you made a feather stick. If it was dry wood, but you didn't have good tinder, then you would make a fuzzy stick and throw it in. You make 5 or 6 fuzzy sticks, and you could hold a match up there and get it to catch and get going. Whereas opposed to a feather stick, you had to make nice long curls with it. And so I did that, talking about how, you know, us old silver wolves, you know, you probably remember being heard about, you know, fuzzy sticks and things in the past, and this young generation never heard of it. There's a lot of terms and things that we had years ago that I heard of as a boy. Those terms are gone. Internet is a great thing, but at the same time, it kind of homogenizes a lot of things. And so words and statements and things that were sometimes regional are kind of lost in that because of our current way of communicating, like LOL. Everybody knows what that means today. 15 years ago, nobody would have known what LOL is. But saying shiny, you know, that was something from the 20s. Or saying that something, you know, had merit, had depth. Or a classic case in point, a word that I heard in my family that I was an adult before I figured out what they were really saying. And it was my grandmother, if something smelled really particularly bad, she'd say it smelled like yarn. Now, the only time I ever heard that word was something stank, and my grandmother would say, oh, that smells like yarn. It didn't fall into any other reference or anything like that. It was only when I was adult and was doing research into my Scottish side of my family that I found out that in Scotland back in the day, a graveyard was an actual grave, was a cairn, which had been Americanized to cairn. It means it smells like something's dead. But she had heard it as a little girl from her great-grandmother. And my grandmother was born in 1901. Her grandmother had been born in, I think she said, like 1799. So she was hearing a little bit from a first generation that had got here, you know, that was 100-year-old woman when she was a little bitty girl. I think not 1799, more like 1809, something like that. But she said that's where she had heard it from. And so cairn, you know, that's word you ain't gonna hear in today's lexicon. How do you even spell that? You know, but we've got a lot of things like that have been kind of homogenized and have dropped out of our language. And part of the idea that I like to do is to remember and define. Oh boy, my nose is itching, guys. Sorry. Feels like I got feathers up my nose getting up there on that roof and all kinds of stuff. Just yeah. But I will find things that were in old books or references and stuff like that. And I want to bring it up to the modern day and try to put it in such a way that people will find reference to it again, because it was a good idea back then, and it's still a good idea today. It's been, that knowledge has kind of been forgotten, overlooked, and just passed on, and passed over. And so I try to bring it up here to the modern time so that we can talk about it and see it, like fuzzy sticks, feather sticks, that type deal. Have you ever heard of touch paper? Touch paper was you took gunpowder, black powder, and you would rub it into the paper, get the paper wet like a paste, and rub it into it. And it made a paper that was very, very susceptible to sparks, and kind of like charcoal. So it's touch paper, not the stuff that went flash like you see in all the magician's tricks, but it would actually ignite from a spark and burn real easy. And so touch paper, or the one where it's a big old wick, we would take pillow ticking, wash it really good, get the sizing out of it, and then we would take a strip that was like 4 inches, I think it was 4.5 inches wide by about like 18 inches long, and you'd roll it really, really tight to make a tight little, like a wick. And we'd put it into a piece of brass tubing, and you could char the end of that, okay? And you could take a flint and steel and strike and hit it, and it would land on that char and catch, and you could blow, and the whole thing go to glowing like the end of a cigar. Well, then you took your tinder and you stuck it up into it, and you blew until you ignited your tinder, put that in the fire, and then you would pull it back down into the tube and hold it against something and smother it. And that kept that char. It was kind of like the cigarette lighter of the early 1800s. A lot of guys carried them in their vest pockets and stuff for lighting cigars or whatever, because you could get it char and get it hot. Like you see people that would take one cigarette to light another cigarette. That's the idea. That's where that came from. It was those rolled up things. Well, back in the 80s in rendezvousing, a lot of guys got in the habit of those. They made their way around a lot of the camps and stuff like that. It became a very common thing. You just don't see much of it anymore. But it was a very well thought out idea. And I thought, having one of those and then just take a ferro rod and go, because ferro rod produces a whole lot hotter spark than does the flint and steel. I could ignite it, keep it going, etc. It'd be a great little quick reusable thing. Oh, let's see. Justin Kuhn, the old folks in my region spoke Czech, Norwegian, Polish, and German. I hear you. Caesar, exactly. Sharpening a knife was everybody sharpened a knife. I can remember getting a whooping because we went to a aunt of mine's house, and I dared to dull one of her kitchen knives by cutting cardboard with it. There's a cardboard box. They had got I think a refrigerator, and it was an hour box, and I'm like a 6, 7-year-old kid. And so I want to make a fort, and I just went in the kitchen, pulled a knife out of the block. I went to cutting windows and doors in the big old box. I was going to, next thing I know, she snatched my butt up and was heating me up, boy, because I was dulling her knife on cardboard, and she had her own sharpening steels and everything in the kitchen, and you didn't touch her knife. And I thought, it's just a knife. No, I learned an education that day. You don't ever touch anybody's knife without asking about it. Yeah, Tiny Titan saying crick. Exactly. What is a branch? That's those little bitty tributaries that go to, what's a creek? Not a creek, a crick. A creek is a bigger tributary that will go dry on the dry years. What's a creek? A creek will not go dry, but it is not so wide to be called a river. And used to, it was if you could get a running start and go over it, it's a creek. If there's no way you can get a running start and jump over it, then it's a river. That was a way it was defined to me when I was a kid. What's the difference between a creek, a branch? These old guys were so descriptive. It was, went down to the branch and turned left at the branch, and then you went up to this thing and it went to the creek, and then you looked for the da-da-da-da, and they were like reading road signs. To me, it was a ditch, but hey, they knew what they were talking about. No, that's a branch. There's no water in it. It's because it's dry and it ain't running right now, but it'll be water there next time it rains. They knew everything. Oh yeah, Gray Wolf. A lot of the Texas has an entire section that speaks German. There's so many German peoples in that one area that migrated into Texas and into other places like that. There's a place up here in Alabama that is Lithuanian. There's so many people in that mountain area up there in this one certain area. They hold a Lithuanian festival every year in Alabama. Most people can't even find Lithuania on a map, but and so many of them moved into that part. People will migrate. Hello, Mr. Simmons. How you doing? Yeah, I don't cotton to that idea, and it ain't much punting. Yeah, exactly. Old phrases like that. I was in early grade school. My first year of first grade, they told us you could not use the word ain't because no such word existed. And then in 1972, they put it into the dictionary and listed it as American slang. Well, I went and got a dictionary and showed her right there. I can use ain't. It's right there. And yeah, that didn't go over real well with Mrs. Arnold. But, hey, kudos for knowing where to look it up at. Does a branch have intermediate wet stretches? Yes, that's the thing. A branch will, the difference between like a ditch is it rains, water runs down the ditch. But once it's migrated out, it goes dry. A branch is closer to the actual water table. And so it rains, and for several days, it may be wet, usually very shallow, but it may be wet. It's not just the surface, but the subsurface water also flowing out would be a branch. Now, a creek is one that it usually will have some water in it, not necessarily flowing water, maybe pools where it rains, the water level comes up, and then it leaves the small little trickling pool of a little deeper hole flowing at a scant trickle to another little deeper hole. That's a creek. And then a creek will have a clearly defined bank, and it's usually somewhere like 8 or 10 feet across, maybe 20 feet across at the most. Whereas a river will be anywhere from 20 feet across to a half mile. That's the size you're getting to. And they spoke about that because, example, a good friend of mine had what he thought he had found a spring on his land. It was not. What it was is about 2 months prior to that, we'd had a hurricane come through, and we got unbelievable amount of rain. That one just a huge rainmaker. As hurricanes go, that was a huge rainmaker. And it's a big hill right there. If you were to go around the base of that hill all the way around, you're probably looking at 5 miles. But there's a layer of non-permeable there, which means the water trickling down hits it and it flows out here. So it's kind of like you got a bucket with a hole in it. It's just running out in one place. And so this wonderful torrent of water he found on his land, like 2 weeks after the hurricane, that it was flowing, etc. And he was so excited about it. and thought it was a spring, that he had an artesian well and it was a spring. And I knew once I saw it and I explained to him, it cannot be a true spring or anything like that because there is no runoff. You see how it's running? Yeah, it's falling below the land, but there's no bank to it, no V to it. It is not sandy in the bottom. This is something relatively new. It's water flowing out of this, forming a ditch. It's cutting a ditch. It may one day become a creek, but right now it's a branch on the off chance it's a creek, but it drained water for nearly 3 months and then it went dry because it's just the water coming out of that hill coming through. But you're looking at such a huge area and it has to percolate down to that level and then run out. And so were you to come in a new landowner going to build your cabin back in the day and went, oh man, look at this perfect water source, I'll build here. And then a year after you get set up, your creek ran dry. And that's the reason people were kind of specific how they termed this of a branch that told you don't put cattle down there. It'll run dry. Don't build a house, use it for a water source. It's going to run dry, etc. A creek, it'll maybe pockets of water. You may want to dig a cistern there and it may hold enough water for you, but you'd be better off buying on a creek so you had a ready source of water or digging a well. And sources of water were a big thing to a lot of the people back in the day. I mean, a really big thing. Bad hat. Yeah, I can't use the word ain't because ain't a word. I heard that before. Oh yeah, tiny. More than likely, you've got being up in that part of the world, your snow load whenever it melts, again like that, it's saturating into some area, and this is the runoff of it. And once that winter snow load is completely evaporated out, so to speak, the creek runs dry. That's one of the things of it. A good friend of mine up in North Alabama, he's on Sand Mountain at Huntsville, Alabama. And on average years, he has a creek in his backyard. Now, to hear him tell it, it's the mighty Amazon. Well, the mighty Amazon at its height is maybe 8 foot across and maybe 3 inches deep. Throughout most of the year, it's just a teeny tiny trickle going between sandy pools, But to hear him tell it, man, it's the mighty Amazon. I mean, for years, I heard him talking about this place. And when I finally did get to go up and visit him and got to see this place, it was like, oh, it's beautiful. I mean, beautiful look. It's up on the side of the mountain. It's great. But as far as you call that a creek? Oh, yeah. He used to work for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, by the way. And my friend Don. And I said, Don, that is not a creek. That's a branch. No, it flooded. He'll plot it out for you for 2 hours. No. What do they do with creek water to make it drinkable? Of course, you can always boil it. Filtering it through sand and other means is usually the preferred method, just like any other water purification. Now, back in the day, you'll hear this a lot about people having a water barrel. And what that would simply be is they would have this big wooden barrel and it would have a spigot coming out the bottom, and they would put clear, like beach sand. They'll find sand on a sandbar somewhere on a river and put about 8 or 9 inches of sand in the bottom of it. And they would bring barrels of water, buckets of water up and fill up the barrel. So you'd have 70, 80 gallons sitting there. And then when they would crack the tap, it would start trickling through and the sand would act as filtration back in the day, which a lot of people just drank raw water. And that's the reason they had a lot of illnesses and things back in them days because of that. That's one of the reasons that alcohol was so prevalent in early society, even going back beyond medieval times, because alcohol kills the bacteria and the bad things in water. And so a lot of people didn't drink water a lot unless it was part of a boiled soup or something, you know. And that's the reason they had mead and near beer and stuff like that is a table beverage, because drinking water was dangerous, kind of in many different ways. And so people down here preferred, you'll hear these terms a lot, spring head. That means where the water's coming right out of the ground. Well, that's filtered. You can drink that straight, usually. And an artesian flow, which means it's pressurized water coming up and out, where it's falling down a gradient or whatever, and it's coming to the surface right there. River water and stuff like that down here in my neck of the woods is so silt laden that if you try to drink it raw, it's kind of like drinking the coffee grounds with the coffee. You get as much mud as you get water. You know, you take a swallow and you got to spit out mud. So it has to be filtered or gone through something to do it. But usually that's what they would do, is that, or boil it, you know, boil it and let it cool out and put it in a crock or something. Exactly. You know, coffee was boiled, never steeped. You always had to boil it. You're killing the water is what you're doing. There was is sand antibacterial? No, but what it does is its abraded property causes the bacteria and stuff to have a difficult time getting through it. So what emerges through it, it's acting like a filter. It's actually trapping it in it. Now, you can't leave that sand in there indefinitely. And so the old wisdom that I was taught when I was little is, and I knew some family members that lived out in the way out yonder that still used filtration barrels and things. And they would talk about changing out that sand every year or two. They would take the sand, they'd let the barrel drain all the way out, scoop the sand out, spread it out on a sheet or something like that in the sun, and let it dry, and let the sun, their solar cleansing, it's what they're doing. They're letting UV radiation destroy any bacteria, because they would keep moving that sand around until it was just bone dry and put it back in the barrel again. So it's normally the height of the summer, the height of the heat is whenever they would clean out the barrel and clean out the sand, and often they would pour boiling water into the barrel to scald the barrel. Now, ships back in the old days, they would scald their barrels, and so it's the same thing that was done on shipboard to carry water. You know, as they would take and scald the barrel with boiling hot water, scrub it, and then they would put the sand into boiling water, and then pour that water into the bucket and build up the layer of sand with that. Well, it was sterilizing the sand and sterilizing the bucket, you know, because all sand is teeny, tiny, tiny, tiny rocks. And so the heat of the boiling water would clean it, and they'd put it into the ship's stores, and they'd open the tap and drain water out of it. That's what they did, you know, going on long sea journeys. They were carrying water that way. They had a tough time making water at sea, because you couldn't carry enough firewood with you to keep a fire running to constantly sterilize the amount of water you're going to need to feed a crew of 100 stuck on a wooden ship. Yep, bad hat. I've seen that before. They'd put little bitty fish in it, into a rain barrel. You've heard the term shooting fish in a barrel. They would, a lot of times they'd bring home fish and put them into the rain barrel, and they'd live in there, and you know, you didn't have to eat them as long as it's alive. I can clean it, kill it, and clean it tomorrow, and keep it like sort of refrigeration, and kept him fresh, and he'd be all right for a couple of days in there before I took him out to harvest him. But they also ate the mosquito larvae. They have itty bitty fish they'd put in there, just eat mosquito larvae and keep that out of the water, you know. Worm wrangler, exactly. Heat, time, temperature. Hello, Joseph from Columbus. Heat, time, temperature. You can sterilize water putting it in a clear, something like a quarter or gallon Ziploc bag, and putting it up in direct sunlight for 8 hours. as long as it's clear water, it will sterilize it because UV radiation will then kill anything in there. The fact of the matter is that the bad things in water, your bacterium, your giardia, your cryptosporidium and stuff like that, don't do well in direct sunlight. That's one of the reasons they thrive in this water, because they can go shade and darkness and get under a rock and, etc. And so they don't have to stay in broad sunlight. And once you force them into that broad sunlight, they don't last long. You got to let it go up there for like 6-8 hours, but it can do it. But boiling water, when it hits a boil, everything's dead. I tell people, you wonder how long to boil it. 1 minute. As soon as it comes to a boil, start counting. When I hit 60 seconds, take it off the fire. Because especially if it came up slow. Now, if you had something that flashed, came up to that heat and went down that fast, you may have some scraggler survivor that just toughed it out. But it takes so long, like 8-10 minutes to come up to the boil. Anything in there would have died by the time it gets to that point. But even then, depending on what your water looks like, if it's bad pond scum and etc., you got to filter that water, because you'll kill it, but then you're drinking pond scum. So, and been there, done that, didn't have a choice, is what we had. And filter that sucker. I have taken a sock before, because I would rather drink through a sock than have green this water was. And we boiled it, and technically everything in it's dead, but it's still green, yucky water. And so I took a sock, and you use that to filter it through a sock, trying to get some of that green yuck out of it. Things you do when you're dying of thirst. No, boiling water does not help, but it doesn't make it smell or taste better. But if you got 2 canteen cups, you can pour it back and forth with vigor, fast, and get air into it, because that's what the stale taste of the water is. It's driven oxygen out of the water. And so a trick that I've done with mine is, because I was doing it in a canteen cup, when I it was boiling, I would have me a stick, usually a little fork on the end of a stick, and I'd put it in that boiling water, removed all bark, so it's just a bare stick. And I'd let the boiling water sterilize the stick. And then when I set it off, I'd whisk the water real vigorously with that stick, whooping air into it as it's cooling down. A, it cools down faster, and 2, you get oxygen back into the water and don't taste so stale. Correct. You can't remove chemicals. You can kill live things, but you can't remove chemicals by boiling. Can you use cattail for filtering standing water? I have heard of it being done. I have heard of them using cattail down. I have heard of using the actual stalk as like a straw, and as a life straw to suck it through it. But I have not done that, so I can't speak to it, but I have heard of it being done. A millbank bag, yes, I have used one of those for filtration. In fact, the multi-bag that I was selling for a while, that was actually through Dan Lutz, which was a tender bag, multi-bag, and it was also a water filtration bag, and you could put a Grail in it, was for filtering that, because a lot of times when you came upon a water source, it's got a lot of turbidity in it. Well, I could take that bag and filter the water and get all the crud out of it, leaving me with water, as opposed to pond scum. So yeah, in fact, I always have, I'm going out, I'm going to believe I might need to refill, I'm going to have either a filter like that, or I'm going to have a bandana or something I can filter it with, or like I said, this millbank bag that's actually a dump pouch and etc. And just for that, to be able to get it out of it. Does rainwater need to be treated, or can it be consumed? Depending on where you're at. If you're near big industrial centers, big cities where you got a lot of air pollution, you need to still treat it. If you're in more open areas, no, you can drink it straight, as long as it is not, for example, if you're in, like I said, a polluted area, what's on your roof is pollution. Water falls onto the roof, runs off the roof, you catch it. That's possibly contaminated from the roof. If you take like a one of your tarps or a piece of plastic and spread it out when it's raining and catch it and funnel it into something, you can usually drink that straight. There won't be anything like Girardi or anything in rainwater that's just fell into the cup, etc. But it can still have chemicals and other contaminants in it. It just depends on where you're at and what you're facing up against. And that's very true of groundwater even. Water sources can easily be contaminated from runoff and stuff like that from agricultural fields, etc. Water looks beautiful and pristine. What you don't know is the top of that hill up yonder is where the farmer parked all his pesticide trucks and trailers for the last 15 years. And that's filtered its way down into the water. So there was a case back, oh God, mid 80s of a hiker that was going through an area not far from me. There was a trail that went through there. And he found a stream in there and he filled up his canteens. It was coming right out of the ground. So he just put some tabs in it, and went on. And he had consumed about half of the first canteen whenever he got to feeling so bad that he sought medical attention. And they put him in the ICU and they couldn't figure out, what was going on. And it was obviously was severely poisoned. And what it was is where he was at, down here at like the creek level, literally a football field uphill from there. The elevation was no more than like 70 feet. Was this big farm thing, and the guy that owned the farm up there had like a 1,500-gallon tank of some sort of pesticide that the tank had busted, and it had gone in the ground. And here he's come along, and didn't look or smell funny. He couldn't tell the difference, but it was something in it that had made it down through there. So anytime, it's always a risk. You just got to look at your environment and try to be as aware and conscious of what's going on, because things like that do happen. You just got to be aware of them. Would ice or freezing conditions kill bacteria? To some degree. But some of the bacterium and stuff like that will go dormant in the ice, and then when you thaw it out, they wake back up. They did not very long ago. They had they found a virus that they say is 49,000 years old. They found in the permafrost up in Alaska, and when they thawed it out, it went back to wiggling and started doing its bit. So it froze 50,000 years ago and woke back up and went back doing its thing. So you can't guarantee that it's going to stop anything. Yeah, 3 drops of iodine per canteen, correct? Mickey, I would filter it and then drink it, because trees are havens for bacteria. Bark is havens for bacteria. It might not have, there may be insect larvae and things like that, skeeters, whatever. And so if you find a stump that's full of water, plan on filtering it. Edgar, and that's just it. It was a very pretty area, and the trail meandered along. The problem with it is it was a working farm up yonder on the hill. He's down here on the riverbank, but the hill up there was that working farm, and that farmer had parked that thing in it. You wouldn't have noticed it. It was just one of them things. And so you just gotta, be kind of self-aware. And even then, Murphy's Law, down out, and there's a lot. Fish do too. Just because the water's clear don't mean something didn't take a poop up the hill. Remember what W.C. Fields said: never drink water. Fish do stuff in it. So it just always makes sense. I mean, for me, being poor coming up, I would boil, as I boiled my canteen cup. Yes, I did the tabs, military issue type water tabs, and they did good. Those times I did not have the time to boil, or it's just, man, it is so hot. I have not got the time to wait for a water to cool down enough for me to drink it, because you bring it up to 212, it boils. The temperature out here right now is 101 with 90% humidity. You take that steel canteen, fill it up, out of the cup, and sit it there, put it in the stream, and a half hour later you can pick it up and it's still like hot coffee, and you're just sweating like a pig. And so that's when tabs would come in, because it didn't heat up the water, because I didn't want to raise my core temperature up any more than I had to. Nomad, how to remove the smell of sulfur from a well. Sounds like you may have actual sulfur down in the ground there. And it just depends on your water. Water has smells, water has taste. You can get filtration for an entire house water system with the big filters that can be used. I knew someone that he had his own well, and what he did was he had the water come out and run through a pool filter first, and then that water flowed into a secondary filter, and then it flowed out of that into finally a Brita filter to get, because he was tapped into a place that was really something down there in the ground, just was really strong tasting, and he had to filter it that much to be able to drink out of his faucet of his well water, because otherwise it was horrible. Peter, before modern plumbing, what was the common way to get water? Digging a well, getting water from a river, or with a cistern system? Yes, all three. Usually in order. If you just came into a new area and you're setting up and you had a water source like a river, you'd start with a river. The river would normally lead into a cistern system where I have a leach, or I have a little branch, or I've got water coming in, or something like that is a better water source. That's where the cistern and the cold houses. That's where people also would do a little bit of refrigeration, where they would build a structure around where the water comes out of the ground. They would make a rock line pool to sit jars of things in to help, because that water coming out of the ground is usually 50 degrees, 48 degrees, something like that. Much cooler than air temperature, so it was a way of keeping stuff cool, the cool house, often called. And then finally, if you didn't have any of that, you'd dig a well. Well was the most labor intensive, and depend on how deep it was down to the water table. Depending on where you're at, you might dig 50, 60 feet down, and you had to do that, with somebody at the bottom of the well digging and putting it in a bucket, and you pulling it up and praying that sucker don't collapse. And on the other hand, you go down and go down, and then you hit the water table, and suddenly the water doesn't trickle in, the water rushes in and starts flooding up the pipe. So whoever was down there had to be able to grab onto that rope and come up. So that was a thing you read about in the, I think it was 1781. There was someone that had gone in the Carolinas and had kept a journal about it. Because he was going with somebody who had a whole lot more experience. They were setting up a farmstead to bring their families out, and they were digging a well. And he asked why he had to be the one down at the bottom of the well digging. And the older guy said, one, you're younger and stronger than me, and two, I don't know how to swim. And so the guy talked about, thought it was funny. The hole was 36, 48 inches like a cross. So he was just kept digging straight down, putting in the bucket. And then he said, I broke through and water came in, and within just a heartbeat, it was knee deep. I grabbed a hold of the rope and went trying to climb up the rope, and I half swam up the thing to a depth of about 20 feet from the top. So very labor intensive. And then once you dig the well and it fills full of water, it may cave in. A lot of labor involved. So what would I do if a river? That's a rapid source I can filter out there. B, a cistern. I can use that in various ways. Third choice, really the least choice I would want to do, is dig a well, because that's going to be a lot of work. The cool is correct. Lewis Ward, cool. Yeah, I'm near something that a piece of history a lot of people don't know. Where Bear lives is at Elba, Alabama. Now, you may remember the name Elba from history. Napoleon was exiled to the island of Elba, and then he got out of it and got back in power and became emperor again. And then, whenever Napoleon finally got defeated at Waterloo, a lot of his officers who had been loyal, so very loyal to Napoleon, France didn't want them back. And so, what are you going to do with them? They're kind of like POWs, and they don't want them to go home. France don't want them back. They'd see them as just malcontents, and people are going to start up problems. So the Louisiana Purchase, which had been like 1800 whatever at Lewis and Clark, etc., where Napoleon had sold Louisiana, all of that, to the United States. The officers and stuff asked, these Napoleon troops asked, could they come to the old Louisiana territory, i.e., to America, because there were still a lot of French settlements that had been in the Indian nations, etc. Could they come here? And so they allowed them to do it. And so some of them came in to this area near where I live, about 14 miles from me. That's where Bear lives. And the actual town of Elba, the old downtown, is an island. You got these steep ridges all the way around, and the river splits this way and a creek splits that way. And so it completely rings all the way around downtown. You got to cross a bridge to get in and out of downtown Elba because of that. And so Napoleon's troops named it Elba because it was, the island that Napoleon had been in. Now they're exiles. And so one of them little things. So I'm living in a place where Napoleon's troops came in. And if you dig deep enough in some of the old records, you'll find French names, and you'll find French street names and things been renamed over the years because most people couldn't pronounce them. But so it was Napoleon's troops, not that far away. Tony Wilson, the hydraulic ram pump. Oh yeah, they're beautiful. Lehman catalog, because they do supplies for the Amish, and they've got a lot of non-electricity stuff like those ram pumps that you can pick up for homesteads and stuff like that. Great idea. Great way to have stuff. And if I was going to be down here, going to be starting from scratch like that, and I was near the creek or something like that, a ram pump would be fantastic, because if I could rig that sucker up where it would ram, and for 1 foot of drop, no, for 10 feet of drop, it'll ram so many feet up. And so be able to fill a tank up would be something I'd want to do. Have it come in as a hydraulic ram and then work it up, way up, and put it into a tank on a tower. I had a friend of mine years ago. He took a industrial tank like you have for farming, and it was a 1,500 gallon tank, and he put it 10 feet up on a little bitty tower, and then he put a pump pulling the water out of a creek, putting it up there. Well, that hydraulic force coming into his house from the tank added water pressure, and then he ran it through a filter system where he had screw on and off filters. And since it was, it came in on the very top, he had a 15 gallon barrel. The water came up from the pump and poured into that. And then at the top on the other side was a pour off that went into the big tank. Well, that lets any kind of sand, turbidity, or whatever would settle into the bottom of this, and just the clearer water would go out the top. And then he would clean out that top barrel about once a month. He'd get up there and just, turn the pump off, pull the lid off, scoop out the sand or whatever, let it settle back down. He'd throw the pump back on and pump it that way. And running it through a filter, he had all the water, and he could actually take a shower, because that much water on a downhill pressure added like 2 or 3 psi to it, and plenty to take a shower with. Yes, you can have running water off grid as long as you have hydraulic pressure of some kind. And that's just simply putting the water in a big enough tank with a downhill run. And then if you want to increase to your pressure, what he had with his was it came out and it was in a 3-inch pipe and it dropped down 8 feet. And then it went from a 3-inch pipe to a 1.5-inch pipe. And that dropped to ground level where it went to a 1/2-inch pipe. And that's where it ran into the sink and the tub was a 1/2-inch pipe. Well, that nicking it down like a funnel boosted the horsepower of it quite a bit. And so when you would turn on flip it over and you had a flash heater, which was a propane powered flash heater. So he didn't have a hot water tank. He had a flash heater and he'd just turn it on and 1, 2, 3, you had hot water and it would blow water out like 6 feet from a shower head. No, it's not like one at home, but it was about double the pressure of like a garden sprayer. You know what I'm talking about when you hit a garden sprayer? About double that pressure, more than enough to take a shower with. Guy, I apologize, I won't be on tomorrow night. It's because we've got a Christmas party for my wife. And so I've just found out tonight that I'm going to the Christmas party tomorrow night and I won't be able to do it live. So thought I'd just hop on tonight and try to share a little. Yeah, Grandpa, Bear's always. Bear has his channel up now and he's got a video up and we went and shot another video last Sunday. And so he should get that posted. And I've got a little bit more work to do with him. And he's going to be able to post, a couple times a week or something like that. So we're getting the wheels turning. I do appreciate y'all going over there and liking, sharing, subscribing to him. I really do appreciate that. Delton Bray, yeah, a little bit of a small stove, yeah, can do a good job, especially when the size of your cabin isn't too big, works really good. Grandpa Buckshot, that's what I set up when we do week-long campouts. I take a garden sprayer and it's labeled shower, okay? I like that because I can put half water and then I take another tea kettle or coffee pot and set it on the fire, heat it up, pour in to mix and make it as warm as I want, screw the lid on, pump up pressure, go in there and sit down, hit the thing. And where the wand head was, I've taken the wand head off and put the aerator adapter that goes onto a kitchen sink. So it makes a little shower head. Hit the button and start spraying. Works really good. When I was doing the redneck camper and I was showing on the side of my truck where I could put a couple of poles hooked at the side and a tarp going 3/4 way around, 3 sides around me and sit that garden spray up there and I can take a shower on the side of the truck. Even if I'm in a camp area, I could be able to step in there and have privacy and have my own shower. Great way to carry one and use one. Joe, water dowsing. I have seen it done personally, and it bore good results. Good friend of mine wanted to put a well in, and there was a guy that was a dowser, and he come out with the classic thing you talk about, the stick bent up, holding the 2 ends out here like this, and watched it move. And I have no doubt of his sincerity that he wasn't trying to mimic anything, but where he went right here, marked the spot, and took his heel and put an X. And where my friend wanted to put his well here, and he said, no, here. And he went on up the hill about another 70 feet and off to the right about 80 feet of where he originally had pointed out, figured somewhere in here. No, here. And looking at that, I would have not have suspected that because where my friend had originally said was kind of in a V, and I felt there was a water table fairly close there. And this guy's pointing up the hill to a place I didn't see a water table. And they went down 42 feet and hit all the water he'd ever need. It was less than 50 foot to a major water. I mean, when they broke it, it blew water. It was an artesian flow. He didn't have to put a pump on it. He just put the pipe and ran it into a tank. And if you don't turn off the tap in the kitchen, it'll run forever because it's just water flowing. Yeah, Water Witch. What's the latest word on the Nighthawk? They are being shipped to me right now. When I talked to Jay, he said that he's shipping them out Monday. And so this week, or very end of this week, or first of the next week, they should show up to me. The second they show up, I done got everybody's package ready to go. All I got to do is roll it up, stick it in it, pull the tab, close it, and then we're going to the post office. So everything is go. I told him, I said, we're at the deadline. He said, I am shipping them now. So they are on the way to me. As soon as they get here, they're coming out. I appreciate y'all's support, and I appreciate y'all's understanding. Kind of put us a little bit back because the blankets finally showed up. And for those of you who don't understand, when Bombproof Bushcraft, which is Madison Pool, and J Hercules, which is Possum Pouch, we all got together and talked, and we talked about doing the blankets, and so I put it out there that if you want one of these blankets, and they're really good blankets, and in the past, when they ordered, and they had ordered several times, this wasn't a one-time deal, you would put in the order, and 3 months later, they showed up. So we put the order in close to December, November, and they gave us a delivery date of April. And then April came and went, and I had quite a few sleepless nights, and so did Madison, so did Jay. It's like, what's going on, guys? And we're contacting the factory, and they said, yes, we're doing it. It's just we've got a personnel problem, and we're trying to get it done, and blah, blah, blah. Well, you understand, if you ever dealt with a big corporation, that you pay your money, and then you wait for the thing to show up. And it didn't show, and it didn't show. And we were really sweating this. And none of the money had been spent. Madison had kept every dime sitting there, so if we had to refund it, we could do it. And then they finally said it's on the way, and then they showed up in the middle of November. And so they've been trying to get all them packaged and sent out and etc. And so that kind of put the Nighthawks in a little bit of this was the glory days of the Nighthawk era, and suddenly we got to push them back. So it pushed us back just a little bit, but they're en route to me right now. We're just waiting on the post office to get their butt and get it to me. Jay has shipped me Blackbird haversacks, and he has shipped them on Monday, and they showed up on Wednesday. He shipped them on Monday, and they didn't show up to the next week on Thursday. It's when the post office gets around to it. He's coming out of West Virginia, so I guess, I don't know, there's a goat train or something got carried. I don't know, but it just seems to vary the shipping time. It's just when they get around, and it being Christmas, I'm going to do my absolute best to get it to y'all as fast as I can. Just as soon as it comes in the door, I will be packaging it up to get it out of here. Oh, yeah, you can add a pouch to the inside of the messenger bag. Depending on how you want to do it, but let me give you a little lessons learned, okay? Create let's say your piece of canvas, okay? Create your piece of canvas with your zipper in it. Go ahead and cut the thing, go ahead and hand sew it in, etc. Roll your edges over, iron them down, and then take a glue stick, like you use for kids' paper, round glue stick, go around the edge, stick it in place on the flap, because the glue stick will hold it just enough that you can sew it without it moving around and bunching up. Because as you sew and you're pulling, you're putting tension in, and you're going around making patching things. I learned this crap the hard way. You start going around, and about the time you get 3/4 way around, it's kind of like warped because of it pulling tight. So the object of the game here is you kind of stick it and it'll hold it in place, so you can sew it and keep it flat and make it look like it's supposed to be there, which I'm talking about hand sewing. If you're doing machine sewing, you can, whatever you want to do. My wife wants to put 2,002 pins to hold one in place, where I prefer to just let it stick for 60 seconds and I'll be done sewing. But hey, Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking for the feedback on you guys on how you like it and etc. The Nighthawk and how it works for you. If we need to change it or whatever, I'm gonna base it upon what y'all's feedback is. Do we need to go a little bigger, a little wider, a little whatever, or if it's fine as it is? That's the reason this first group is the one that's really doing the field test with it before we jump into it and do a bigger run. Because nothing says uh-oh than a opinion of one. And so this is something I kind of designed. Great. I'm basing it upon a lot of things I've used and carried and worked with, and things I've seen, things I've actually made in the past, and I made my prototype up. And then Jay created the refined one. We went a little bit bigger, and he was right, because I know exactly what I'm going to put in it. And so you may not automatically have a down sleeping bag that's that big. I do. That would fit in the bottom of it. And so he was right. Scale it up a little bit for the average guy's gear. And he was right. And so we went a little bit bigger than my original prototype. But once we hear back from you guys on, yes, I like this could be a little different, whatever, we'll refine it and then we'll go for production. Yes, CJ, staples work good to hold it in place. I had a leather bag many years ago that I was creating, and I've still got it though, out of elk, and it was a kind of like a haversack, kind of a shot pouch, and I wanted to line it on the inside and have real nice lining, and I would sew it, and it would just get you'd get done, and it was just wrinkles. And then a wise old sage told me, he said, when you take it back apart this time, take the lining material that you're planning on putting on the inside, take the top flap and put spray adhesive on it and glue it to that 2 yards of red felt. Glue every part that's supposed to be, and then cut it out. Now, whenever you go to sew it, it's flat because it's glued to it all the way around. I bet I took that thing apart 10 times. I could never get it to lay flat and look right until I glued it. And then once I glued it, I took my stapler and went around and would line it up and just click, 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 because I had a 1/2 inch seam all the way around, not a 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch seam all the way around. And I just went click, 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 and you won't see this. It's just to hold it so that I could then sew it. And then once it was sewed, I took the staples off as I got to them, and was able to turn it right side out. Man, it looked great. Looked like I'd done it professionally or something, like I knew what I was doing. You love those projects that make you look good, that you look like you knew what you were doing whenever they didn't see you sitting there like a monkey in a football the night before trying to figure out how this works. Yeah. Nomad Hellfire Stew, which is grease, bacon drippings actually, or some other bacon drippings, and crumbled up hardtack, and then add salt and pepper, and sometimes there's little pieces of meat ground up as well. I know what you're talking about, Hellfire Stew. And I have eaten it, not as a Civil War reenactor, but as actually a French and Indian War reenactor. Just because we're doing it don't mean we're cooking the right stuff. And somebody had made up a bunch of hardtack, and they were experimenting with it. What could we do with it? My favorite thing to do with hardtack was actually chicken noodle soup. I would take the oh man. I would take hardtack and bust it up into old thumb size humps and put it into a pot and add just enough water to cover it and boil it until it started coming apart, getting soft. Then I'd tear it up with a fork. And then on top of that, I would add chicken bouillon to that and stir that up. And then I'd add a can of white chicken meat, and take a flour tortilla and cut in little bitty strips and drizzle that in there and stir it up and make chicken soup out of it. And the hardtack acts as a thickener. and worked really, really well for it. But there's he got on the hardtack craze, and he was constantly, giving everybody, well, I made too much. You can have some. And he'd make the size of a hamburger bun, about that thick, hardtack. And like you see in Tasting History or whatever, that gentleman that does a very good show. And if you haven't seen that, I recommend it. When he shows him going bang, bang, hitting to him, that's what it was. We used to joke we could use them for targets to shoot them with a shotgun and they wouldn't break, use it for skeet because it was that hard. But you could boil it and get it soft enough to eat, but God forbid you try to chew it, forget it. Head or bacon grease spread on it. Depends on how hungry you are. Have I ever made pemmican? Yes. Back in the day, we did quite a bit of pemmican. And although I personally preferred it, there was a gentleman not far from me that raised buffalo for butcher. And I would go down there and get a buffalo hump and take that and make jerky out of it. And if that jerky didn't get eaten, which was rare, over the course of a season, whatever was left, I would pound up and add the stuff to it and make pemmican. And I think that the buffalo pemmican tasted better to me. We were using lard and pemmican and dried fruits and berries, beat up, a couple of the grains, some acorn flour mixed in, and make a thick cake out of that. And I prefer taste if at all possible. Shoreship, have you ever made buckskin jackets? I have made Indian war shirts. I have made Blackfoot, Crow, and Sioux war shirts, but I've never made an actual, like a buckskin jacket. But I've made war shirts before. Of course, I've made hunter's frocks and stuff like that, but I haven't made them out of buckskin. Buckskin is too much work. I was wanted to learn how to do brain tan buckskin, and the military fort not far from me had a big hunting area and was very, very, stocked with deer, and it would not be unusual for a weekend 15 or 20 bucks, just bucks, to be taken, and you had to take the deer over to the game wardens, and they would measure them and etc. before you could take it home. You had to check them in, so to speak. Well, immediately beside the ranger hut was a cleaning area that was set up to clean deer. And so I thought I would go over there and just collect up some deer hide. Well, people are just butchering it for meat. They're not trying to do it for hides. And so they would just, yeah. And so I had a brain moment, and I put up a sign on the back of my pickup truck one Saturday morning that said, "I'll clean your deer for $20. Well, since I'm cleaning it, I get to skin it, right? I get to control how I take the hide off of it. I really wanted the hide. And I had oodles of people lined up, and I cleaned like 16 or 17. I really don't remember. A lot of deer. I really felt I had stepped off in the deep end. And a lot of times I would get the deer cleaned, I'd get it gutted, and then they'd start talking about, man, I only need the back strap, and you can have the rest of it. I came home with 5 deer, basically, and all the hides. So I took that, and then I processed, scraped them, slipped the hides, made buckskin, and of course I got brains. And I made buckskin war shirts and leggings and Plains Western outfit, because I was doing that in that day. Back in them days, my hair was black and it was down to my belt in the back. Y'all wouldn't even recognize me back in them days. I didn't have this right here, but I had long black hair. Though actually my hair had turned this color white by the time I was 20. I was having to dye my hair back in them days because I was a young guy and I didn't want to look old. And but I had long hair. And I'd do a Native American impersonation, a Plains Indian. And so I did that. And I had several guys go, "How much would you charge me to make me one of those war shirts? They don't print money that color. You don't understand what you're looking at. The beadwork and everything on it, you're looking at 500 or 600 hours of me making the buckskin, making the shirt, doing all the beading and everything on it to make from a historic picture a copy of an actual in a museums or something somewhere, a Crow, a Blackfoot, or a Sioux war shirt. And then whenever I would grow out of it or want to get rid of it or whatever, I got guns. You trade me a gun for this because I'm not giving these away. That was too much work. Any tips to keep ticks off you? Yes. One, B vitamins. It makes you taste bad to all the blood-sucking parasites. My wife is somebody that she'll attract mosquitoes, ticks, anything. She's just sweet. But she can take B vitamins and it'll drop off. I'm somebody that's got a bad metabolism, and because that, they don't stay on me long. I taste bad. So B vitamin will make it where they may attach, but they're not going to stay on you long. You taste bad to them. You don't smell or taste anything different, and you can't OD on it. It just goes on out. Don't be stupid and take them by the shovelful, okay? Just start taking like 2 a day for a week and then go to like 1 or 2 a day. And when you're going to be around a lot of mosquitoes, ticks, whatever, and it makes them where they don't want to stay on you. You taste bad to them. Now, beyond that, permatin and stuff on gear and your outer clothing works good. Putting Vicks Vapor Rub around your top of your sock, stuff like that, or places like back of your collar, someplace like camphor, something like that can help. And people advocate about taking duct tape and go backwards around your boot so it's sticky side out, and it acts like a sticky trap. But down here in my part of the South, ticks don't come up, they drop down. They'll get out on the end of a limb, and you'll walk by and they'll drop on you. So you're more likely to find one up here than you are down there. And so usually where I find a tick is around my collar level or around my waist level, because they drop onto my shirt. Being with this hat, that's another thing. They'll start crawling around the edge, and I've looked up many times and realized that's a tick. Thump. So just some little ideas. Hope that helps. Yeah, Chuck, permatin is a little pricey, but worth it. Which I only treat my stuff usually like once a year. Beginning of the season, normally about May, is when I'll take and I got certain things I'll spray down with it, because man, you wouldn't believe the mosquitoes down here. They just hatch out by the billions in the end of March, early May, and then you got ticks popping up. And usually by the middle of June, it kind of calms down a little bit. But for that 6-8 weeks, man, it's just, they're everywhere. Yeah, Jeff, to rub tobacco, yeah, because the nicotine in tobacco is toxic to them. I knew we shall say, very experienced, unsavory old fellow who'd been a CB in World War II and was running a putwood company and was going down in the swamps to cut cypresses and stuff like that. And he chewed Levi Garrett. And he would spit into his hand and wipe it onto his cuffs and wipe it onto the back of his neck and stuff like that to keep ticks and mosquitoes and stuff off of him. You didn't invite this guy to lunch, but he didn't get eat up with bugs either, What's the easiest way to tan a hide if you don't care to do it historically? If you're going to slip the fur and everything else, take the hide and put it into a bucket of water. I like to go get pickling salt. It's a finer salt, and dissolve it in a little bit of water in the bottom of the bucket, just warm tap water until it dissolves, and then put the hide in and put water up to the top of it. Swish it around so it fully coats. Leave it in there about a week or so, and test it where you pull it out and you pull on the hair and it'll slip the hair this way. The hair will just come off. When that happens, put it over something and take a dull edge like a ruler or something. They make tools for this, but the back of a kitchen knife, and rub, and the hair will just slide off, leaving the hide. Once you've got the hide that way, it is now raw hide. You then can buy chemicals that are designed for tanning. It's just a solution, basically. It's like brain tanning. Same idea. And you're going to smear it on the whole hide, let it sit X amount of time, follow the direction, and you're going to do all the working to break it and get it going again. Once you break it and it's flexible and everything and it's dry, it is either tanned or it is broken rawhide. The difference is if it gets wet, if it goes back stiff, it's broken rawhide. You need to put another coat of the material on there, whatever that goop, paste, whatever you're using for tanning, go back onto it with that. Now, I've seen hides tanned with wood ashes before. I've seen hides tanned with egg yolk, etc. Mel of the Woods, that she has her own place and she's part of the Fuel the Fire group, that she does classes on how to brain tan, how to break the hides and everything else. And that'd be somebody I'd look at, Mel of the Mountains. And the Fuel the Fire group, go look on Facebook and look for Fuel the Fire. And if you'll hit me up on Facebook, I'll try to hook you up to the right person. And she does classes and stuff on how to do it. And if you're one of them just needs to see somebody do it hands-on, that's the way to do it. Because it is a technical, complicated process. It's very easy to make rawhide. Again, soak it in water, take it out when the hair slips, scrape it off, let it dry. It's rawhide. You can make it into anything. Break it and flex it while it's drying. That's broke rawhide, and it works fine until it gets wet, and then it gets stiff again. What the chemical process of the tanning does is keep it from getting stiff again. Okay, Edgar, you want to put that they make stuff. I know years ago, Tandy, I don't know anymore, guys. My knowledge is dated, but Tandy had a tanning solution for that. You would soak it, but you don't soak it till the hide slips. You like soak it 24 hours. Take it out and wring it out really good. And then you, on the hide side, smear this cream on it and let it penetrate. And then you're going to have to still break it and soften it, but you would keep the hair on it that way. So just going to have to look for a tanning paste. Typically the way it's called is a tanning paste, and follow directions on that as best I can tell you. It's one of them things, it's a hands-on, something you're looking at. I got a buffalo hide many years ago because I wanted to make me a buffalo robe, which is not something you wear. It's a sleeping blanket made out of a full-size buffalo hide. And the one I got was rawhide that had the fur on it. And so this buffalo hide was like 8.5 feet by 12 feet. This was a big buffalo. And I used a big garbage can to soak it and tried to tan it with the hair on. And it didn't work. After I had got it halfway broke to where it was kind of like, I would say it would be like a welcome mat. That's how stiff it was. But I could bend it around things and the hair went sliding off of it. And so I could not, make it into a blanket like I wanted. And I was a little bummed about it for a couple of days, and I just left it in the garage for a couple of weeks. And then a good friend of mine came over and said, "What you gonna do with it?" And I said, "What do you mean, what am I gonna do with it?" He said, "Well, it can't be a buffalo robe." I said, "I got the biggest hunk of rawhide you ever seen, dude. I just soaked it some more and made the hair slip and turned it into, it looked like a sheet of plywood. It was so big, like 2 sheets. And it was just, in areas, it was an 1/8 inch thick, 8 to a 1/4 inch thick in places. And so I cut that thing up and made all kinds of projects out of that thing. I bet I made 50 projects out of that hide after that. So that's the one thing. If you try it and you're trying to do it with the hair on and it just goes south, and you can still turn it into rawhide and turn it into something with that. At least you're not completely lost. Flax grows wild, is able to make linseed oil. Possibly, but man, you're talking, yeah, it can be done, to make stuff like that. But that's a lot of work to make stuff like that. Oh yeah. Oils off fats you wouldn't want to consume. Also, being oil to maintain your tools with, you're talking about like tallow and lard and stuff like that. As long as there's not any salt in it, it normally works pretty good for the above. In fact, my preferred leather treatment is actually heavy mineral oil and tallow mixed 50-50. Makes a very good leather preserver and stuff like that. And you can put on the tools, you can put on whatever. The mineral oil and the tallow together make this. It's not exactly Vaseline, but it actually feels more like a syrup. It's thick though, and you can put a little bit on just a dab on a rag and put it onto a tool or something like that, and it works great. It also does good on leather to make a water preserver. Water will run off of it, protection, but it can get a little stiff in the winter. That's the reason I don't use it a whole lot. But my winters are kind of short down here, and so I don't have to worry about it so much. Or you look B, you're looking for something for a haversack other than one of mine. Campcraft makes tons of haversacks, and they're really good haversacks. So you might want to look at Campcraft. They may have something that you'd be interested in. And I'll be doing another run. In fact, I just closed this run a week or so ago, the fourth run. And I'm going to be doing a fifth run, but it probably won't come about till probably February, because we've got the this run to do, and it's supposed to come in end of January. So in the next month is whenever the fourth run will be coming to me to ship out, and then we'll start a fifth run probably in the beginning of February. Oh yeah, but you have Bear's haversack. Yep. Well, guys, that's an hour and a half, and it's 9:30 here. So you guys off in the far-flung place, it's 10:30 or whatever. I guess that's pretty good for an impromptu. I appreciate y'all turning in so unexpected and etc. And thank you very much for all the support. But I think I'm gonna go take me a shower and get to bed. It's been a long day, guys. Well, guys, thank you very much. And I will not be on tomorrow night, but I will be on next Thursday night, next week. And of course, there'll be more videos coming out during the week till then. There'll be an always dropping this Sunday. And so hopefully, everything gonna keep going. Till next time, guys, y'all have a good night. Stay safe. Bye-bye.